I was born and raised in a normal middle-class Southern Baptist family in Tennessee. Now, to us, to be normal in Memphis, my hometown in the early 60s, meant going to church at least every Sunday morning, Sunday night, and prayer meetings on Wednesday night, like most everywhere in the South back then, I suppose. Some of my earliest memories are of Sunday school and Sunday worship services, where on at least one Easter Sunday morning, while the rest of the church was singing, "Up from the grave he arose with a mighty triumph o'er his foes," I belted out, "Here comes Peter Cottontail." It's not so much that I really remember this happening, but my mother reminded me of it many, many times over the years. It's another one of my family's legends. Guess I was trying to put my own spin on Southern Baptist theology even back then. As I began elementary school and grew into adolescence, the children's and youth groups of the church were my social sphere. I tried to form close friendships with the most popular boys in my Royal Ambassadors class that met on Wednesday nights. Royal Ambassadors was sort of the Southern Baptist version of the Boy Scouts. But while I attained a degree of popularity because of my amazing sense of humor, I'd inherited my dad's dry wit and could make most anyone laugh, there was no denying I just wasn't quite like the other boys my age. This grew more apparent when I was old enough for Little League Baseball and all my friends eagerly signed up. Although my dad tried and tried to encourage me to play baseball, I flatly refused. Never having played a game of pitch with my dad, or even been shown how to hold a glove, I wanted no part of it. Sports just didn't come naturally to me, and I had no interest. At that young age, I began to learn the lesson of what it meant to be different and to not fit in. I spoke differently and had different mannerisms than the other boys my age, and it was obvious that it made them uncomfortable. I've never forgotten the sting of my older sister's words a few years later. She was probably 15 or 16 at the time, and during a family conversation one evening, she tearfully complained to my parents that none of the boys she was interested in dating would ever come over to our house to see her because of me. I was a sissy, not like the other boys, and none of her friends could stand to be around me, she said. While that was painful enough to hear, I guess what hurt the most was that, from what I remember, neither of my parents had any response. And so it began. With no one to encourage me to feel good about me, I grew to hate who I was inside, to believe that the part of me that was different from others was wrong. I longed to be just like the other boys at school. I mean, it was obvious. If I was ever going to make any real friends at all and survive 8th grade and beyond, I'd have to be better at fitting in. At that young age, everyone wants to be like their peers. It's all about being part of the group, isn't it? What did I do? I became very self-conscious about my every mannerism and speech pattern and tried to make a new James. I desperately wanted to change my nature. The one place I still found solace was my church youth group. And while many of them were considered nerds and outcasts at school, none seemed quite as unpopular as me, at least in my mind. Sharing my religious experiences with these kids gave us a common bond we wouldn't have had otherwise, helped me feel a part of the group to some extent, and I took comfort in knowing that God loved me. Unfortunately, though, the God we were being taught about and worshiping was a God that was full of love for us only if we measured up to the standards our church leaders held for us. And all that time spent at church reinforced my fears as I was told over and over that the Bible was the literal Word of God, a user's manual for my life, if you will, complete with instructions for every situation right there in black and white. And if I didn't follow the instructions, my manufacturer's warranty would be voided. I was never told that God loved me for me, just as the unique boy that I was. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not here this morning to criticize any religious denomination. What I am sharing is simply my own personal experience. As I grew into a teenager, and of course was expected to date, I had several unenthusiastic attempts at relationships with girls. Most of these ended the same way, as the girl would become really frustrated when I reminded her over and over that Jesus wouldn't want us to go too far. It just wouldn't be Christian. What an easy out for me, having no physical attraction to them anyway. And what good Christian young woman could argue with that? Then there were the boys I developed crushes on. Being in total denial about my sexuality, I wasn't sure why it felt so good to be around certain boys my age. But I convinced myself it had something to do with being brothers in Christ. After high school, I chose the Southern Baptist College I went to in large part because my best friend, who I was totally infatuated with, was going there and we could room together. Going away to college was a good step for me, though. It afforded my first opportunity to explore how I really felt about life, and it was there I first began to question the beliefs that I'd been raised with. Well, thank goodness for raging hormones. When I was 21 and couldn't stand it any longer, I burst out of the closet and began the wonderful, amazing journey of discovering who James really is. After coming out, I moved to New York City as my quest continued. While now a proudly gay man, I wasn't ready to seek the divine just yet, though. In fact, I didn't have any sort of spiritual practice the 13 years that I spent in New York. The painful, tender wounds from my past life in the Southern Baptist Church took a long time to heal, and they were too tender to even touch for a long time. Then, when the time was right, I guess I felt the call to move to Provincetown, Massachusetts, at the tip of Cape Cod. Not long after moving there, I was drawn to the UU Meeting House, where my spirit began to get real nourishment. Only this time, I learned to look within myself to find God, to follow the voice inside rather than arbitrary rules on a printed page. It's been quite a journey, and not always easy. All that religious dogma that had filled my brain from childhood played a big part in shaping my mind and my being. All I was taught while growing up about the hell that awaited me if I didn't obey the rules of the church, and the wrath of God that I would have to deal with if I didn't toe the line, is still here somewhere inside. Thankfully, I've learned how to deal with it, as its power over me has waned over time, and several years of therapy helped a lot too. But it looks like it will be one of those voices I'll have to choose not to listen to for the rest of my life. How might things have been different if I hadn't felt the need to deny my own unique self and imitate the other normal kids around me as I grew up? If I hadn't been taught that God hated the real me inside, that being gay was an abomination? What if instead I had been told that the person I was, awkward, effeminate ways and all, was okay? More than okay, that everything about me was a wondrous, unique creation and meant to be celebrated. What if my individuality and creativity as a child had been celebrated and encouraged instead of stifled? One of my favorite movies is Billy Elliot. It's the story of an 11-year-old boy from a working class family in England who just isn't like the other kids. The film opens as a neighborhood party is being held at his family's home. Billy's family is new to the neighborhood and trying desperately to fit in and to impress their new neighbors. while Billy's parents are entertaining downstairs, mixing cocktails and serving hors d'oeuvres to their new neighbors, co-workers, and Billy's father's boss, we see that little Billy is busy upstairs in his parents' bedroom, putting on his mother's jewelry, her bright red lipstick, and clumsily stepping into her high heels. Once he's gotten the whole outfit just right, he opens the bedroom door and begins his triumphant descent down the stairs to proudly show his new look to his parents and their new friends in the crowded living room. Well, you can imagine what happens next. I should interject here that playing dress up in mom's clothes, while a popular gay stereotype, really has nothing to do with sexual orientation. In fact, Billy wasn't even gay. As the film continues, Billy, the son of a coal miner, is on his way to boxing lessons. Imagine whose idea that was. When he stumbles upon a ballet class, he secretly joins the class, knowing that his blue-collar family will never understand. Under the guidance of his teacher, Billy's raw talent takes flight. But when his father discovers his son's ambition, Billy must fight to hold on to his dreams. For me, the beauty of this film is this one young boy's ability to reach beyond his place in the world and follow his heart's desire. And in being true to who he really is, he becomes a wonderful success doing what he loves. And even his father supports his choices in the end. Of course, Billy Elliot is a Hollywood story and not real life. But on my path, I've learned that if we really look within ourselves and find the beauty that is there, nurture those qualities that we find, and follow that truth, we will become the unique, spiritual, holy creatures we were meant to be. It's all there inside us already. God is not only all around us, God is in us. God is us. We are one. I'll never know how my life would have been different had the real me been nurtured and encouraged to grow from the start, but I can certainly see the fruits of having been in tune with the light inside these last several years. I've rediscovered my voice. I met the love of my life in the UU Church Choir in Provincetown, and together we've been given the gift of performing together, sharing a message that the world so desperately needs to hear, and helping others find the joy of singing. I couldn't ask for more. What is it that keeps us from enjoying the freedom of being our best selves? For me, it was the shame and narrow-mindedness of my family, my friends, and my world at that time. For some, it's the need to be a success at our job, the need for acceptance by friends. For others, it's a partner's affection that we're afraid of losing that keeps us from listening to our inner voice and being what it asks us to be. But whatever the obvious reason we have for choosing to try to fit in, rather than utilizing the power to become fully ourselves, I believe the root cause is always the same: fear. For me, fear of a vengeful fire and brimstone hurling God was drilled into my psyche from childhood. Underlying my fear of being different than my peers was the fear that God would banish me to hell if I listened to my inner voice and allowed me to be who I was. For you, it might be fear of losing your friends or your comfortable life. Billy Elliot's father, and my parents too, feared their son's unusual habits because they didn't understand them. It's human nature to be afraid of what we can't explain or understand. And if fear is left unchecked, we grow to hate what we fear. But we can move beyond being ruled by our fear if we acknowledge the holiness that is within every one of us, even those of us we don't especially like or can't understand. Just like the beauty we see in nature all around us, in leaves rocks, and the beautiful mountains surrounding us here in North Carolina. Each one of us is a unique, magnificent being. We each have our own special place in creation that is ours alone. No one else can be us. Trust what is inside. Trust what is inside.